Tonight we're making some seared scallops with an angel hair pasta with lemon, garlic, and cherry tomatoes and some fresh herbs. It's what I could find. I really like scallops. I couldn't find the big sea scallops. I'm working with the little baby bay scallops. They just take a lot less time to cook. They're just as delicious. I just need to be really fast about the cooking process. This is a really simple, straightforward recipe. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 10 ingredients. They're all pretty simple. And a lot of these, I think that a lot of people have general items like this already ready to go in their pantry or fridge. If you don't have scallops, if you don't like scallops, if you can't find scallops, this would be really delicious with shrimp. And I have noticed that there's been shrimp available in the freezer sections in those bags. So really good option. It'd be great with fish. I prefer salmon, and that would add a little bit of that really delicious good fat to this dish because we're only using olive oil and a teeny tiny bit of butter, so a little bit of that salmon would be great. Chicken also would be fantastic. I would use chicken breast if I was going to be doing this with chicken, and I would basically do it the same way. I would just cook the chicken first and then separate it out, not mix it together the way I'm going to do with the scallops, and you'll kind of see that as I go along. I'll explain that. And then as we get going, Amy's going to help out with really helpful information that I don't know. I get to learn like 5 new things a night. It's so much fun. So to start out, I like to just walk through the ingredients. You all will get the email, the recipe emailed afterwards, but just so I'm using angel hair pasta. I happen to have it. If you have spaghetti, if you have the thick spaghettini, if you have penne, like whatever you can find. Whole grain is a really great option, but just pasta. I've got angel hair. Like I said, fresh herbs. I'm just working with some of my favorites, but I also was thinking sort of in line with Mediterranean, Italian, California. I've got basil, oregano, a little bit of parsley, and some fresh thyme. The herbs people aren't panic buying herbs, which is great. So I've been able to find some herbs. Hopefully, when you make your big trips, herbs are a really good thing to have around because you just throw into your roasted veggies, your soups, your food. They add so much flavor and nothing bad. We've got fresh garlic, lemon, cherry tomatoes down in this bowl, and I've got an onion here, which you can probably all see is starting to grow a whole new onion. And I wanted to use that specifically to show you that this is not bad. This is not worth throwing away yet. There's still plenty of onion on there that I can use, and I don't need a ton. So I really am trying not to waste fresh food these days, especially any day, but especially these days. And in terms of equipment, I've got a zester, the microplane zester we'll use later to finish it with that lemon, as well as this little juice tweezer, just because I've got a few small paper cuts and I don't want to use my hands tonight. I've got a good nonstick pan here, which I'm going to be using for all of the searing and making the sauce. I've already got some water in this pot and it's already going because I didn't want you to have to wait for me to watch water boil. It does take a while. So this is I'm gonna get this coming back up to full temperature. So when you're making pasta, you want to fill up the pot just as much as you need to. You don't need to overfill with water. You want enough water to cover the amount of pasta you plan to cook, and that's it. The more water you have, the less likely it is for the starches to kind of condense in on themselves, which actually help your sauces stick to your pasta. So if you cook your pasta in less water, just enough to cover it, you're going to really condense the starches on the outside of that noodle, and it's going to stick to the sauces a lot better. It just creates a better finished product in the end. So just enough water to cover the amount of pasta that you're cooking. And I haven't done this yet, but right now I'm going to add salt. This is traditionally all you need to add to water. I'm adding about 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. And that not only seasons our pasta, but helps keep it from sticking. I don't recommend adding olive oil to pasta water. Some people do that. It floats on top of your water. It's not going to really ever stick to your pasta. It doesn't really do what we think that it does. And then you just kind of get this greasy film on the outside of your food. It doesn't really ever get into there. If you put enough salt, if you put a couple tablespoons of salt in your water, that's going to be enough to help keep it from sticking. And you don't need the oil in the long run for that. So I usually put a towel like this on here. It just helps me remember that this is hot. So when I come back to it in a minute, I'm not an idiot and grab it and hurt myself. So that just is a nice, helpful reminder, and works also if you have other people around you in your house or your kitchen to let them know that that's on and that's hot. I'm going to get things prepped out here. This is pretty straightforward. These scallops have been drained, so they're already thawed out, and I drained them and rinsed them under cold water just to get any residual water that they had been frozen in. Sometimes there's that like crystally water that I want to get all of that out and get these as dry as possible on a couple of paper towels, because the drier they are, the nicer of a sear and the better of a caramelization that I'm going to get on that one side. So you can see how very, very small these little bay scallops are. They're really tiny in comparison to a good sea scallop, but I like that because, one, like I said, it takes no time to cook, and it's already in a bite size ready to go, which is perfect for my pasta. I don't have to deal with cutting anything or dealing with anything. It's just a fork and a plate. Fewer dishes as possible for me. So these little scallops have been dried for about 15 minutes. I just wanted to make sure I got any excess water off. I'm going to take them off the paper towel, and then I'm just going to let them set aside for a minute while I get the other stuff ready.
And scallops are a great source of protein. There's about 20 grams and 3 ounces, which it looks like you might have around 3 ounces there.
Yeah, actually it's at 4.
Okay. And they contain a large amount of the fat that they contain is actually from the omega-3 fatty acids, which are the fish oils, which are great for inflammation. They're also a good source of selenium, which we also need for immune function, which is important right now so we can stay healthy.
Really? That's awesome. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. They're really low in fat too, right? In terms of protein, they don't have a lot of...
Yeah, so high in protein and low in fat, and the fat that they do contain is that healthy omega-3 fats mostly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
They also, interestingly, I didn't realize that they naturally are fairly high in sodium. So typically you probably don't need to add a lot of salt to them because they naturally contain some flavor.
They are one of those seafoods that I wouldn't ever say that they taste like fishy, because that creates a really gross image in people's head of like overly fishy, but they are briny. They taste like something that lives in the ocean, and in a very delicious, almost sweet and salty way. If you haven't really tried scallops, that's how I would describe them. So this onion, as you can see, I just cut it in half. I took off the end that was growing again, and I'm actually going to save that and put that in water and see what happens, because I think it will keep growing a little bit. But these roots actually are the part that if I wanted to, I could stick that in the ground and that would start growing again too. But I left that root attached. I think a lot of you have learned this already, but I want to make sure when you're cutting an onion, you always leave that hairy root end attached. Cut it in half through that, and then take the outside layers off as much as you need to. This onion has been sitting for a while, so it's not all good anymore. So I'm going to just peel it back to the point that it is still good. And I don't need a ton, so that's going to be just enough for me. I just recommend not throwing away all of the food when a lot of it is still usable and good. So I'm going to peel both of these halves all the way back, and then this one is pretty gnarly. There we go. Get rid of this stuff. So for these onions, even though it had a little bit of that green core coming out of it, that middle is still edible. It's still perfectly good onion. If it had a really thick green stem, you could just peel it out with your fingers because it might be a little bit bitter, but it's just really strong onion flavor at this point. So I'm going to cut this the way that I normally do, leaving this hand flat on top. I'm going to cut horizontally into the side of the onion, but not going all the way through, so that root end is still attached. And then I'm going to go down into the onion, following the natural lines right around the whole onion. It has those natural grooves in it. You want to just follow those around the side, and then turn it and cut straight down across those cuts you already made, creating these nice little diced onions all the way back until it's no good anymore, and that's the end of that. I'm going to do that with both sides, and I want to cut this onion fairly small. This dish is not about onion, except I really want that good flavor in there. So I want to chop it up pretty fine so that the flavor spreads out, and I'm not really noticing that I'm eating a lot of onion while I eat the dish. That's all. I really kind of want to focus this on the cherry tomatoes and the scallops themselves. All right.
Onions are a great way to add flavor without adding calories, fat, sodium, and they do contain antioxidants, which is a very nice bonus too.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm taking a whole really big clove of garlic. This dish, you want to, if you like garlic, go to town with the garlic. Actually, oh, this is 2 pieces, great. And to quickly peel the garlic, take the flat edge of your knife and smash down on it on your cutting board. And that should get that paper off really easily. Comes right off, even this little bit. Okay. And then I want this to be chopped up super fine, minced up garlic. So if you have a garlic press, you can use that. If you have a little food processor, you can chop it up in that, but that's easier to do when you have a lot of garlic, which actually you can totally do that. Prep up a bunch of garlic for the next few days, and it lasts in your fridge in a tight lid container for 3 to 4 days if you pre-chop a bunch of garlic in the Cuisinart or food processor or a little Ninja or something like that. Then you don't have to deal with this. I tend not to do that because it grows, doesn't grow. It releases some of its own natural like juices, some of its water, and the longer it sits, then it just takes on a different consistency. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's still really good flavor. I just don't like the actual chew. It's a weird thing, but there you go. So I've got this very finely minced garlic. I'm gonna leave that here with the onions. So we're getting all of our stuff prepped out. You want to get all your things prepped in advance, especially with a dish like this, because once I start cooking it, it's going to take maybe 10 minutes tops to finish it. So I need everything to be ready. I can't stop at the scallops to go and cut things because these scallops are so small. They will take no time to finish, and then they'll be ruined before I'm done chopping over here. So this is called our mise en place, which is French kitchen term for everything in its place. It just means you get all your prep ready in advance so everything is set up and ready to go, and then you cook. So I'm getting these cherry tomatoes all set up on this little Tupperware lid that I have here. This is my favorite way of cutting small annoying things like cherry tomatoes. You put it on the indentation side like it's sitting in that little pool, and then you take the other lid and flip it on top. Use a serrated bread knife or a small knife with teeth on it, and gently holding that lid down, you just saw your knife back and forth, using the lids in as a guide, and you've got cherry tomatoes cut in half, ready to go.
Yeah, tomatoes are just a great source of potassium. Actually, 10 cherry tomatoes has the amount of potassium as a medium banana. So we don't often think of cherry tomatoes as being high in potassium, but they are. Also contain antioxidants like vitamin C, lycopene, which is shown to be beneficial for fighting certain kinds of cancers. So also low in calories and naturally sweet.
I definitely didn't know that about the potassium. I think that I'm surprised every time that I find out other things have potassium in them. I just always think of bananas, and it's so ingrained in us that that's what you should go for, but wow, there's so many other things.
Definitely. Potassium is found in most of our fruits and mostly vegetables, dark green leafy vegetables. Yeah, lots of different sources, but tomatoes, potatoes, even high sources of potassium.
Awesome. Very cool. I'm getting our herbs ready. This is the last of the prep that we want to do. Like I said, I've got fresh basil and parsley. Both of those are soft herbs. I'm not even going to worry about the stems of the parsley because stems are totally edible on that herb. I am going to worry about the stems on this oregano and this thyme. Those are just little sticks. We don't want to eat those stems. So you want to grab like one of the little sticks and just pull down to remove all the little leaves on the thyme. And I'm just going to do that with a little bit of this so that I can get all of that good flavor mixed in. And then once I have all of my pile of herbs here, I'm going to bring it together in a nice tight bunch and then chop it all together. And this is going to go in partway through cooking, and then most of it's going to go in at the end, just because, like I said, they're soft herbs, and if they cook too long, they just get ruined and turn black and kind of lose a lot of their luster. So we put those in towards the end so they stay kind of fresh and delicious. Get all these oregano stems out of here.
I think that's one of the great things about cooking for yourself and using a lot of fresh herbs like this. You know, I didn't even really appreciate how much herbs are used in medicine, right? And how many properties they have that are healthy and help to fight disease. And like basil, for instance, can it has antimicrobial, antibacterial, and even antiviral properties. They've done studies where, at least in a test tube, basil will prevent the growth of norovirus, which is what causes the common cold. So we don't know if it will help necessarily prevent a human from getting it, but it's interesting information nonetheless.
Very. Wow. Okay, so the water is up to a good boil. I'm going to put the pasta in because this particular pasta, the package says it takes about 11 minutes, which I'm going to check it at around 9 because packages are always based on just averages, and I don't know if my kitchen is a little hotter or the altitude is different or any of those things might play a little part. So you want to always check your food just maybe a little bit under what a recipe suggests to you. But when it comes to commercial products like pasta and rice and things like that, the cooking instructions on the package are the way to go. There's nothing that I can improve upon that. They have figured it out. And so I'm going to put my pasta in. I'm going to set my timer. My handy dandy imitation mold. Okay. So when you're putting in a long pasta, you want to be really aware that it all gets under the water. You don't want to come back to it in a little while and find that the ends of it never got underneath there and they're completely dry while the rest of your pasta is already cooking. So when you first put it in there, make sure you give it a good stir around. I like to use tongs. A lot of chefs I use tongs for almost everything, but especially because I can really grab the pasta and pull it away from each other and separate it out, kind of like I would with my fingers if that weren't boiling hot water. So I'm just gonna give that a good stir, let that come back up to a rolling boil, and then I'm gonna adjust the heat because I think probably a lot of people have had this experience. When you get pasta up to a super high rolling boil, it can go all over the place if you're not careful. So once it comes back up to a rolling boil, I'm gonna turn that heat down to sort of a medium, let it keep simmering at a high simmer until that timer goes off. In the meantime, this nonstick pan, I'm gonna get it going on this medium high heat. Not all the way hot, but not medium, right in the middle. When you're sauteing anything, you want it to have a good amount of heat before you put anything into it. But these scallops, like I've said, I think a couple times, they take no time. So I really don't want to overdo them. Like a lot of other shellfish or seafood, if you overcook it, it can just feel rubbery, like you're chewing on rubber bands. Not fun for anybody. So while the pan's getting hot, all I have left to do is kind of chop these herbs, but I want them to stay really beautiful and nice looking. So I'm barely going to chop them. I'm just going to run my knife through this mound of herbs that I made a few times to give it that kind of crushed up, chopped thing. But mostly all I'm trying to do is wake up the flavors and start to get things releasing and mixing together. But that's it. I want them to look like fresh, beautiful green herbs when we put that on at the end. So that's going to just stay here. We've got all of our stuff ready to go. This pan is getting hot. So for the scallops to start with, I'm going to use just a tiny bit of olive oil. I know that I told you I'm going to be using butter, and I will be towards the end. So you don't need as much olive oil as you would if you were not adding any butter later. But if we started with the butter now and cooked all of this stuff with butter in a high heat, it would burn. It's too long to cook butter at a really high temperature. Butter likes to cook at a low temperature for a long time or at a high temperature for a very short time. So because I want to cook this for at least 6-7 minutes, this whole process, that would be too long for butter. So the butter is going to go in a little bit. Get this oil nice and hot, and then we're going to put in our scallops. You probably noticed, You've probably noticed that I haven't seasoned this. I'm going to do that when it gets into the pan, but if I salt this now, it can actually start a kind of a cooking process. Not as much as if it were an acid, like if I put the lemon juice on this right now, it would actually start to cook it. But salt can start to tenderize and break this muscle tissue down. And if I salt it too early, then this will become really like soggy in texture when it cooks. And I want it to keep that bite. So I'm going to season it when it gets into the pan. It's not like if it were a big cut of chicken or meat. You want to season that first so that it can really kind of impregnate into it. This is such a tiny little muscle that it would actually make it a little tough once I start cooking it. So we don't want to do that. I'm going to season it in the pan. So this is really hot. I'm going to away from me so I don't splatter myself. I'm going to slide these in. And then I'm going to really quickly shake them out so that they're in one layer. You want this to be in a nice single flat layer so that each scallop is making surface contact with the pan. And then you don't touch it. Because to get that good caramelization, you want to leave that one side down for at least the amount of time that it takes to sear, which is about 1 minute with these little scallops, no more than a minute. So now I'm going to add a little bit of the salt. That was about a 1/4 teaspoon. And some black pepper. Some people really like black pepper in their food. Go for it. That is a very personal choice. So I still haven't touched them. Oh, it smells so good. There was a man who invented smell-o-vision and it didn't take off. I think that there was only one model ever created as an example to try to sell to investors. And then that was lost somehow, but it was an actual thing you could plug in and I could press in things and you would get a sense in your room of the ocean as I was cooking. I don't know, I think that's kind of funny. All right, so it's been a minute. Now I'm going to stir these up. Oh yeah. So again, with my non-stick pan, I want to make sure I'm not using a metal tool. So you can either use a silicone spatula or have this nice wooden spoon. I'm going to bring this over here and show you. If I can get them to flip over. Can you guys kind of see? Oh, they're sliding around in the pan here. There's some like golden brown color on some of the edges. That's the color that we're looking for throughout. But these are so small, I don't want them to overcook. So now I'm going to let some of that water cook itself off at a pretty high heat. And I'm going to start adding in my other ingredients. My onions and garlic that we chopped up nice and small. Those are going to go in there and cook up with the scallops. And this is now at full blast because I want this part of the process to take no more than about 5 minutes. Stir up the pasta. That looks great.
Well, I think too, there's a lot of options with pasta these days for gluten-free. If you have anyone that needs to be gluten-free, there's all sorts of different choices. I made some brown rice pasta the other night. I'm not gluten-free, but I just wanted to give it a try and it actually had great flavor. You can get some that are made with lentils or chickpeas, which would make them fairly high in fiber too, which is awesome. So a lot more options.
Yeah, I just made one last week that was made out of red lentil pasta, and it's not like I'm actually replacing regular pasta because they're obviously a little bit different in texture, but I added so much fiber and protein into a dish that wouldn't have had it if I had used regular pasta, and it was delicious, and it cooked in even less time than the regular rotini pasta would. So yeah, I was surprised, and I think because, again, people don't really know what to do with that, or they don't really think they want gluten-free pasta. There's still some of that left on the shelves, I've noticed at the store. So if you're willing to experiment with the gluten-free variety, then try it. You're just going to increase your plant-based intake. So this pasta is ready. I'm going to turn this. There it goes. My colander is already in my sink over here. I'm going to very carefully take this whole pot and drain it right into the colander. I know that a lot of the times you want to save a little bit of the pasta water. Excuse me. Just in case you want to thicken up your sauce. And we're not really making a sauce, but the starch that's in this pasta water will actually help our scallop and tomato sauce come together and stick to the pasta. So it's kind of like when you bring it all together, that water is the secret ingredient to finish it all off pretty perfectly. Make sure that this doesn't burn while I drain the pasta. So if you need to play around with your heat, you can do that. Nope. Looks good. I actually kind of want to develop a little bit of a buildup on the bottom of the pan, because then we're going to deglaze with some wine. So like I said, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a quick question. Someone's asking, and it sounds like this would be delicious to me, but asking about using tofu in place of scallops.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I would make sure that you use the extra firm tofu and drain it really well overnight, just because then when you sear it, you're going to get that good bite to it rather than let it fall apart and get kind of too watery. Because the things that you are adding, like the tomatoes and a little bit of, the olive oil if you wanted to skip the butter, all of those things can help to add liquid. So you want to make sure that the tofu stays nice and firm when you do that. But yeah, absolutely. That would be a really great addition, or a substitution, So I don't drink wine, but I got this hilarious tiny bottle from the store, because the regular grocery store, that is something, they are still, they're pretty low on wine. People are panic buying the wine. So this pan has built up a fond, F-O-N-D, F as in Frank, fond. And I'm very fond of the fond. It is the favorite part. It's kind of, it's all of the caramelized bits and flavor that comes off the bottom, and it's all the browned bits. People think, oh no, all my food is burned. That's the good stuff. Like, that's the flavor that we really want in our food. Loud noises. So to get that all off the bottom, to get it off the pan and into the onions and scallops, you're going to deglaze with a little bit of wine. You can do stock, you can do water, you can do a little tomato juice, depending on what you're cooking. I am going to let you do a little bit of wine. If I were Julia Child, I would pour this in there and then I would drink some. But I'm not. No one could ever be Julia Child except Julia Child. Okay, so that liquid, you want to get it to move around the pan and loosen up all of those brown bits of flavor. And as it cooks itself off and evaporates, you stir it into the food, and then all of those bits of flavor that it helps scrape up start to get into your food, which you are now making twice as flavorful. Okay, I want to get rid of this pasta here. So now I'm going to add these tomatoes and just a teaspoon of butter. And I live like my grandmother. I leave my butter out on the counter all the time, except for maybe a month or so in the middle of the summer. But that's also why I leave it in a little bowl, not on a plate or in a flat dish, because even if it were to melt, it's not going anywhere. It's just my little bowl of butter, and then it's ready to go. So that's about a teaspoon of butter. It's right into the side of the pan. And this is still at a pretty high heat, medium high right now. I want to let that butter get a tiny bit brown. Brown butter is one of the most delicious treasures in the kitchen. It's a nutty flavor. It's got a really, really amazing quality to it. It is on the fine line of burning it though. So you want to practice making brown butter if you haven't done that before. But as soon as your butter starts to get those little bits, then you're good, because it'll continue cooking and continue browning. But we're going to get this all mixed up in here with the butter, the tomatoes, scallops, onions, garlic.
I think it's great that you can combine different types of fats, right? So you can minimize, like, you don't need a lot of butter, but you can add it. It adds great flavor and richness. Fats actually also help us to absorb the lycopene that's in tomatoes. So, and cooked tomatoes, we absorb the lycopene better too. So cooking the tomatoes in a little fat is great for bringing out the lycopene.
I'm adding that to my list. That's the thing that I just learned today. I love that so much. And we're cooking these tomatoes until they blister. We're not trying to get them to be soup. That would ruin the quality of our presentation and of our food. So we want to get them on this really high heat just until they blister, which is quite literally the skin on the outside starts to blister a little bit. And that is happening quite quickly. There's some discoloration happening, a little bit of like the red skin starts to turn a little yellowish and orangish because it's starting to shrivel and cook itself up. You can see a little bit of caramelization happening around the edges. So that is that. I am adding a pinch of red chili flakes because I really like spicy food. You can add a whole ton of red chili flakes if you really like spicy food, but this goes really well with garlic and lemon, these crushed red chilies. So that goes in now. I'm going to bring the pasta over now. So this is a dish that I'm going to actually finish together in this pan. I want the pasta to really get mixed into the sauce and the flavor, and because it's not a very liquidy sauce, this is the best way to do it. We call it picking up the pasta. So when you go to a restaurant and you order pasta, they have your pasta already cooked, and they make the sauce in the pan, and then they put the pasta in the pan, and they pick up it. It's called picking up the dish, and they send it out on your plate. So we're going to pick up the pasta by adding the cooked pasta right into our pan with this delicious sauce stuff. I'm going to use the tongs to get that really well mixed in. I don't want to keep flipping this now because it's a lot of pasta that's going to fly in my face. So at this point, I also want to make sure that there's enough liquid. I'm not going to add any more butter because that's really good. I'm just going to add a touch more olive oil to help finish it. We're going to go into our lemon, which I want to zest first. If I squeeze this first, it would be very hard to zest after. It's important to remember that order if you're going to be trying to do both. I'm going to zest it right over the pan using the palm of my hand so that my knuckles are nowhere near the grate because that's extremely painful. And just gently scrape it across through microplane, getting all that fresh yellowy lemon zest right into our pasta. You don't want to scrape it too far if you have a microplane. If you get too deep into that white skin, then it starts to get really bitter. So just on that fresh yellowy outside, tap it in there. And now I'm going to toss in my herbs, most of them. Always try to leave a little bit of your fresh, beautiful, chopped something as a garnish. Just thinking about presentation, even if you're just giving this to yourself, which you shouldn't think that way. You're just as special as anyone else. You want to make it look as beautiful as you possibly can. It's really good for your brain when you're eating more beautiful food. It goes a long way to convincing you that, you know, it's even fancier than it actually is. Okay, while this comes together, I definitely don't want to overcook the pasta or get it gummy, so I have turned the heat down. And now I'm turning it off because I think that we are there. Yeah.
That lemon adds a lot of great flavor, some freshness, and brightens up the flavor of the dish. Also a great source of vitamin C. But I had a question. When do you use like lemon juice versus the, I don't know why I'm blanking on, the zest? Yeah.
Honestly, well, I'm going to use both for this, but I think that it's sort of dependent on what you're going for. The zest has a much like brighter quality. I know that lemon juice can be added to things and it does make things taste sort of fresher and brighter and more awake, but it has a very distinctive flavor, and lemon zest as well. It's very lemon, but it's a little bit more bright and refreshing in the sense of like when you add it to it, it doesn't overwhelm. It just kind of dusts with flavor. It's a little bit lighter. It depends on what you're doing also because you're adding less of a liquid content. So if you're making something like you're baking, zest is usually used more frequently, depending, unless the recipe has worked out for the acid content and the liquid content of the juice itself. If you're trying to keep something dry, then you would just use the zest. I actually want to kind of create more of a sauce out of this, so that's why I'm also using the juice. So I'm going to squeeze, this is 1/4 of a lemon. I'm squeezing that all the way over it. It has the butter, olive oil, tomatoes, onions, garlic, chili flakes, basil, oregano, and those really delicious seared bay scallops, which I'm so excited about. I'm just going to very gently put this in my serving dish, and then because I care about how my food looks, and you should too, I'm just going to present it with a little bit more of this nice fine herbs on top. And then if I definitely had people over, this is when you want to make sure that those beautiful scallops you spent time searing are like visible and you can see them on top. Wipe your edges down. be a real pro, because it's my world, and I'm putting more chili flakes on mine. And that's it.
Beautiful.
Super simple, really, really fresh and refreshing, especially as we're getting into hotter weather. It's getting a lot warmer this week right now, and these kinds of dishes are really simple in terms of the ingredients and how long it takes to make it. You see, we're only 40 minutes into our hour, so that didn't take long at all. Another reason why I like using those little baby scallops, because dinner is ready in a flash. And this is clearly more than enough for one person. I've got dinner for the next 3 nights, and it's really it's just fresh and good for you. There's, I don't know, other than that tiny teaspoon of butter, I guess there's nothing bad for you. And even that teaspoon of butter, I would argue that it's good for your soul. So yeah, I don't know. Amy, is there anything that you would want to add we didn't talk about specifically?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's great that it's like a one dish item, right? All of that goodness is all blended together, which can be awesome. I know when we present like the My Plate, it shows a plate with all the different groups, like, separated, right? But most people don't eat that way, right? Most people eat them in combination. So, you kind of have all those groups. They're just in one bowl, which is pretty cool.
It just makes it a little bit, I know that I'm getting all the things that I need, and I don't have to worry about sort of like where it goes on a plate. It's just all together, and everything goes really well together. And especially for me, I mean, if you all weren't here with me tonight, I probably would have eaten this right out of the pan, so that I didn't have this bowl to wash, because you can see I have no dishwasher in this 2-foot wide space. And we all, we make it work as easy for yourself as you can, so that you enjoy the process and especially the outcome. I've got this pan to cook, I've got a couple of tools, and then that big pot with the pasta. That's it.
Yeah, it's a pretty easy cleanup for such a gourmet meal.
See, and this is the fun part. This is something that you can impress people with, and it is gourmet in a sense. You could go to a restaurant and pay a lot of money for a seared scallop pasta, but once you've got the technique down, you can do it for, I don't know, a quarter of the price when you get that bag of frozen scallops. Or like I said, this would be equally delicious with shrimp. If you are more partial to shrimp, or you can't find scallops, or you just don't want to try using those, this would be really, really good with shrimp. I would just make sure to get the already deveined shrimp. And for me, I would get the tail off, because in this instance, I don't want to be worrying about picking the tails off or anything. But I also know lots of people eat those shrimp tails. They're really good for you. And so whatever you prefer, just make sure you're getting them cleaned, so you don't have to worry about the deveining process, which is really gross and time consuming. So save yourself the trouble on that if you can. This would be great with any other herbs. If you have eggplant, if you have zucchini, if you find some other sort of Mediterranean or that Italian coast foods that go along with that, things that are very Californian, think about those things. Any of those would be really good additions to this dish. It would help change it up. You'd be adding even more nutrient value. And then it just depends on what you can find at the store. I really recommend right now, especially when I go to the store, as rarely as I can, I go directly to the protein section, because I don't eat a lot of meat, but I want to make sure that I have a little bit in my diet throughout the week. And I try to get some ground turkey, or I try to get a little chicken, or I try to get some seafood. And then I go straight to the produce section and I fill up my cart. Most of my fridge is from either the farmer's market or the produce section at the store. And then after that, filling in your pantry staples with grains, canned goods, basic things that you can use in lots of versatile ways. And just think outside those boxes, like we talked about a little bit earlier. If it's a kind of pasta, like a plant-based pasta you've never tried, now's the time to probably try it. Give it a whirl. I am slow cooking some pinto beans tomorrow, which I haven't done in about 10 years, but there's a lot of things that I can use those for, and I found them at the store. So you know what? I'm gonna go for it. all of a sudden sourdough is the most popular thing in the world, which is great. So I'm really happy that everybody's experimenting in the kitchen and having a lot of fun. Just, think about that when you're at the store of how many different meals you can use with one particular item, and then play around with as many of the fresh items that you possibly can. That's all I would say.
Yeah, and I think the more you can learn to cook with fresh ingredients, a lot of fresh vegetables and herbs and spices and things, like it just really makes us healthier, right? We know that a lot of our lifestyle determines our chronic disease risk, right? And so I was looking at some research that was showing, or some data that was showing, that over 650,000 people die in the US every year from heart disease. And that's mostly preventable through our lifestyle changes, right? So yeah, just keep pursuing healthy eating, everyone out there. And I think, the more skills that you have in the kitchen, the healthier your diet can be. You're less reliant on eating out and fast food and processed foods.
Yeah.
And
yeah, and knowing what goes into your bowl, you have a better mindset of knowing what isn't going into your body. And I know I'm good at what I do, but like, this took me no time. It will take you no time to put together something that really makes your body and your mind feel good about what you've just done. I wanted to say, for next week, we are going to start, I'm going to be promoting the recipe that we're going to be making a little bit more in advance. Now, I don't encourage anybody to make any special trips to the grocery store. If you've already gone and you have enough stuff in your kitchen, then please don't make a special extra trip just for this workshop. But if you are going to be going to the store, or you can get a delivery of some things, or you wanted to look through your inventory and see if you could kind of make a substitution, and you could follow along with me next week, then we're going to try to make that a possibility, because some people express interest in doing that. So we want to make sure that you're getting as much out of this as you can. So like I said, I'm going to put out the general ingredient list, and you can try to get it, but please don't make any special trips. Okay, we're definitely not encouraging that. I'm making as few trips as possible. I had a lot of this stuff already, the angel hair pasta. That's why I used that, because I had that. Parsley, I had it from a dish that I taught in the class yesterday. There's things that you try to think about so that you can really be efficient and safe. So
we did have one more question. The question says, are those plant-based pastas in regular stores? I think what they're maybe asking about is like different types of grain other than flour, because even regular pasta is a plant, right? It's made with flour. Wheat flour. But yes, so you can get those at most stores. Ralph's, Trader Joe's doesn't have quite the variety that you might find at a bigger store like Vons or Ralph's, but you can usually find gluten-free. You can usually find, at least at Ralph's, like brown rice pasta. There's some chickpea and lentil pastas. Sometimes you have to look in the sections that's more kind of the organic-y type of section within like just a regular big, large grocery chain. Some of the smaller stores may not have a lot of options, but the bigger stores usually do.
Yeah, my local John's has a little section next to its regular pasta where it has some quinoa pasta, some lentil pasta, and some brown rice pasta. It's not a huge section because I don't think there's a huge demand for it necessarily in this neighborhood, but they have it. So I feel like if this store has it, then a lot of the stores have it. Because yeah, like I said, all of the other pasta was gone except for the gluten-free pasta. So I have some, and it's the red lentil pasta is really good, and it's just from Barilla, that really popular company that makes pasta, Barilla pasta. Yeah, there's a lot of the major brands now make alternate variety and different kinds that you can try. So hopefully it's not too hard to look for or find, but if you can find regular pasta or regular whole grain pasta, that's lots of different fun options out there. Hi, Erin. So, yeah, if there's any other questions, we would love to answer them or help out any substitution ideas for this dish. If not, we can always end a little early. Know that next week, look for the promotions so that you can see what we're going to be making. And Actually, you know what? I can always send that out to you on the email list since you're all registered on the email list. But I'm also going to put it in the promotion. So keep your eyes open and try to see, you know, if you can match up a few of the ingredients and play along with me at home, then that would be really fun. But don't feel pressured to do that because these recordings will be available for you down the road. So you can always watch it after the fact and press pause if I go too fast, or rewind if you want to hear something that Amy said or anything like that. We will make these available. That's how I like to watch Bob Ross. Press pause, try to paint, catch up to him, press play.
So we did have one last question about the recipes, and I think they're referring to like not just like tonight, but maybe the ones that you've made before. They have, so it says that they've registered a few times and haven't received the recipes. Are they posted somewhere, or is there a way for people to obtain? I know sometimes there's not really a recipe, right? It's just you're kind of combining ingredients.
Yeah, well, yeah, that is usually how I cook, but then after I usually do type it up what I've used, and just so that you all have something. So the first lesson, I know that Kelly sent out the recipe, and then I just sent out last week's earlier today. I thought that I had sent it out last week, but there wasn't.
Well, I can pass this person's email address on.
Definitely, yeah, pass the email on, because if you weren't on the list for some reason or you didn't get it sent to you, I will make sure that it gets sent out, because I want to make sure that everybody who's participating can redo this or do this some more. And very soon we're creating a recipe library that's going to be accessible, I think, on the Teaching Kitchen website, because a lot of the students and grad students have expressed interest in having like a resource for where they can find helpful recipes. So that is something that we're going to be working on down the road, and we'll let you all know when that's available. But all of these resources will be, if they're not now, they will be on the Teaching Kitchen website. And the easiest way to get a question to me, if you wanted to just go directly to the source, would be on our Instagram page. We're at UCLA Teaching Kitchen, and I manage that, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So if you were working on one of these recipes at home and you thought, you know, could I substitute this? I don't know, I wanted to ask, I'm here for you. And yeah, if there's any other questions, happy to stick around for a few minutes. Otherwise, really, I hope you try something, at least a variation on this dish. It's a little bit like a primavera pasta, very spring, very refreshing, very delicious. You can add anything, you can take out almost anything, just mix and match, but stick with, you know, a shellfish or a fish that you like, a good light pasta, lots of veggies, little tiny bit of butter.
Great.
All right. Any other questions?
Let's see. Oh, there is one more. Do you cook the salmon in a similar way to the scallop, season before or after cooking?
If you were using a whole piece of salmon for this, I would season it before. I would sear it in the same way that I did. I got the pan hot and then the oil hot, and then you put the fish in, presentation side down. So whatever side looks the nicest, you season that up and then sear that side first. It's usually the side that didn't have the skin on it. And you let that sear until you get a really good golden brown caramelized crust on that one side. And then you flip it over and finish it in the oven is what I would do with salmon, just because that'll give you a nice interior poached feeling without drying out completely on the outside. If you were to just sear it hard on both sides, you might not finish cooking it through to the middle. Although I kind of like my salmon a little medium rare, it's really entirely up to you. You want to make sure that you're cooking it to a safe temperature. So I would sear it hard on one side, put it in the oven at 325 for about another 6 to 7 minutes, and then while that's finishing, I would make my sauce in another pan, finish the pasta, and serve the salmon on top. That's how I would do it if it was for me, and then you could present it really nicely to yourself, or in that sense, you could do it on the side, like salmon and pasta on the side, but it looks really nice if you kind of lay it across the top and then finish with your herbs. It's a good question. It's almost the same, but no, since it's a whole piece of fish, you want to make sure that it cooks through, and so that would be better done separately from the sauce.
Great.
Very good question. It would be exactly the same method though if you were using shrimp. So you sear the shrimp and then you can kind of make your sauce right in the same pan with the shrimp. You would just do it the same way as I did the scallops. Awesome.
All right. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you everybody for being here. I hope you have a lovely evening and hope we see you all next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, Julia. It
Thank
was
you.
great.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye.
Bye.